In this lesson, we want to talk about Cramer's rule for a 3x3 linear system. So in the last lesson, we talked about using Cramer's rule to solve a 2x2 linear system. Now we're just going to take the next step and we're going to look at some examples with kind of a 3x3 linear system. This is no more difficult. It's just a little bit more tedious, okay, because it takes more time to kind of calculate things. So let's just start out with this example here. We have our system, and notice how every equation is already written in standard form for us. Again, this is something that's very important to check, okay? If you have a 3-variable system, okay, and you have 3 equations, you want to make sure every equation is ax plus by plus cz equals t, okay? And you might get different notation. You might have x sub 1 through x sub 3, but you want to make sure that everything lines up, right? So the x's line up, the y's line up, the z's line up, the constants line up, because when you load information into your kind of matrices, it's got to make sense, okay? All the columns have to correspond to kind of the same thing, whether it's, the coefficients for x or y or z or the constants, it's all got to line up and make sense, okay? So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started with this problem. The very first thing we want to do, as we saw in kind of the last lesson, we want to set up our kind of D, okay? And this is the determinant of the coefficient matrix. So if I take my coefficients from the system, in the first equation, I'd have -3, I'd have 2, and I'd have a -1. Okay, so that's an implied coefficient of -1. So let's just write that in the top. So -3, we'd have 2, and then -1, okay? And then for my second kind of row here, I'd have a -1, and you could write that in if you want, okay? Let me make that a little bit better. So again, a -1, we would have a 3 and a -3. So a -1, a 3, and a -3, okay? Then we're going to have a -1 again. So let me write that in. So -1. You're going to have a 2 and a -3. So -1, 2, and -3. Okay? So this is finding the determinant of the coefficient matrix. Now, we need 3 other kind of setups like this. We need d sub x, d sub y, and d sub z. So let me kind of write d sub x first. And each time I write one of these, I'm going to go ahead and just move it to another page because we're going to very quickly run out of room, okay? So d sub x would be equal to what? Well, essentially what I do is I take this guy right here and I take the column where the kind of coefficients correspond to this variable that I'm looking at. So in this case, it's x. If it was y, if it was z, you've got to look at that kind of column that corresponds to the coefficients for that variable. In this case, I'm looking at this guy because this column represents the coefficients for the kind of x variable. What I want to do is I want to replace that column and that column only with the constants of the system. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and put -15, -9, and -13. So I just took these values, put them here in this place here, okay? And this, the rest of it's going to stay the same. So you have 2, 3, 2, -1, -3, and -3. So that part's the same. And I'm just going to cut this away. I'm going to go to a fresh sheet. And I'm going to paste this in, and I'm going to put that right there. Okay, so that's going to stay there. And we'll come back to this in a little while. Let's get the rest of it going. So I'm going to erase this highlighting here. And now what I want to do is I want to find d sub y. Well, again, it's the same thought process, except now the kind of column that corresponds to the coefficients for the y variable, that's going to be this middle column here. So everything else would be the same. So -3, -1, and -1. Again, this guy is the coefficients for the x variable. This is what's going to change in the middle. So I'm taking the constants. So -15, -9, and -13. Write that in. And then this guy right here, the coefficients for the kind of z variable, that's going to stay the same. So -1, -3, and -3. So let me cut this away, and then grab all of it. So let me cut this away. Okay, so let me go back up. So now we just need to find d sub z. Okay, so that's the last one. So again, it's the same thought process. So these first 2 columns will be the same. So -3, -1, -1, 2, 3, and 2. And again, I'm looking at the kind of column here that corresponds to the coefficients for this variable. Okay, so I'm going to replace this with the constants of the system. It's just that easy. So -15, -9, and -13. Okay. So let me copy this and get rid of it from here. And let me paste that in. So each one has its own page. Okay. So let me go back up. And the very first thing we want to do is copy this and figure out what this kind of D is going to be equal to. So let's calculate the determinant of this first, because it's going to be used in every formula. And again, if you don't remember that, I'll talk about that in a second. But the first thing is we need to calculate the value of D, okay? So I'm going to use the shortcut here. I'm going to copy the first two columns. So -3, -1, -1. We have 2, we have 3, and we have 2, okay? So what I want to do is multiply going down first. So I want to start here, and I want to multiply down. So you'd have -3 times 3 times -3. So you know that would be positive, and 3 cubed is 27. So I would say this is 27, then plus. I'm going to multiply down this diagonal here. So 2 times -3 times -1, that's going to be 6, then plus. I'm going to multiply down this diagonal. -1 times -1 times 2 is 2, okay? So I'm going to put some brackets around that, or you can do the operation now if you want. But basically, you're going to subtract away, put some brackets around this. Now I'm going to multiply up. So this is getting kind of busy to where we can't see stuff. So let me erase these arrows, and we'll get rid of that so we can see what's going on. So -1 times 3 times -1 is going to be +3, okay? Then plus, we're going to go up. 2 times -3 times -3. I know that would be 9 times 2, which is 18. Then plus, if I do -3 times -1 times 2, that's going to be positive. 3 times 2 is 6, okay? So what's this going to be equal to? Well, 27 plus 6 is going to be 33, and then plus 2 is 35. And then minus 3 plus 18 is 21, plus 6 is 27. If I do 35 minus 27, I get 8, okay? So D here is equal to 8. So let's just erase all of this, okay? I'm going to erase this. And I'm just going to say that the value here is going to be 8. And again, this is going to be used in every formula. So let me go back up to this part right here. I'm just going to erase all this highlighting. We don't need it anymore. And I'm just going to put that D is equal to 8, okay? Now, I also need to know what D sub X is. I need to know what D sub Y is. And I need to know what D sub Z is, because in each case, we're going to be using this to get our answers. So let's go down, and let's calculate these guys. So again, I'm going to use my shortcut. I'm just going to write this as -15, -9, and -13. Just copy the first two columns, so 2, 3, and 2. So I'm going to start by multiplying down, okay? So I'm going to multiply down. So -15 times 3 times -3, which is going to be 135, okay? Then plus, I'm going to put some brackets around this. We're going to multiply down again. So 2 times -3 times -13 is going to be 78, okay? Then plus, I'm going to multiply down again. So -1 times -9 times 2 is going to give me positive 18, okay? So then we're going to subtract away. I'm just going to erase this. Normally I leave it, but it's a little bit heavy, so it might block us from seeing stuff. I'm going to multiply up now. So -13 times 3 times -1, which is going to be 39, okay? And then plus, we're going to multiply up. So you've got 2 times -3 times -15. And so that's going to be 90, okay? And then plus, we have -3 times -9 times 2. So that's going to be 27 times 2, which is 54. So let's go ahead and crank this out. So 135 plus 78 is 213, plus 18 is 231. Okay, then minus, if we do 39 plus 90, we get 129, plus 54 is 183, okay? So what we want is 231 minus 183, which is 48, okay? So this is 48. So let's erase all this and just put that this is equal to 48. Okay, so let's go back up and let's say this is 48. So now let's find D sub Y. So again, copy the first two columns. So -3, -1, -1. You've got -15, -9, and -13. Again, I'm going to multiply down to start. So I'm going to multiply this way. So -3 times -9 times -3 is -81. Okay. Then plus, I'm going to multiply down here. So you've got 3 negatives, so you know it's going to be a negative. And then 15 times 3 is going to be 45. And then plus, if I go down this way, -1 times -1 is +1, then times -13 is -13, okay? So let's just go ahead and find this sum real quick. So -81 plus -45 is -126. Then if I add -13, I get -139. So let me just put that in there. So -139, and then minus, I'm going to multiply up now. Let me get rid of these kind of arrows. So I'm going to start here and go up. So you've got 3 negatives, so you know it's negative, and it's just going to be 9 there. Then for this guy, you've got negative 13 times negative 3 times negative 3, so you know that's negative. And 13 times 9 is basically what you'd have, and that's 117. So this would be minus 117, or you could put plus negative 117 if you want. And then lastly, you want to do this one. So you've got negative 3 times negative 1, which is 3, times negative 15, which is minus 45, or plus negative 45. So negative 9 minus 117 is negative 126. If I subtract away another 45, I get negative 171. So this is negative 171. Now, you have minus a negative here, which becomes plus a positive. You get negative 139 plus 171, which is equal to 32. Okay, so this is 32. So let's erase all of this and say that this is equal to 32. Okay, and let's go back up and let's say this is 32. Okay, let's go back down. Okay, so this is the last one to do. Let me erase that highlighting. We don't need that. And I'm just going to copy again the first 2 columns. And so I would have negative 3, negative 1 again, 2, 3, and then 2. So I'm going to multiply down. So negative 3 times negative 13 is 117. Okay, then plus, you've got 2 times negative 9 times negative 1, that's 18. Then plus, you've got negative 15 times negative 1 times 2, that's going to give me positive 30. Okay, so 117 plus 18 is 135, plus 30 is 165. So the first part is 165, then minus, let me kind of erase these because they just get in our way. So let me go up now. So this way, negative 1 times 3 is negative 3, times negative 15 is positive 45. Then plus, if I go up here, 2 times negative 9 is negative 18, then times negative 3 is positive 54, okay? And then plus, let me go up here, negative 13 times negative 1 is 13, then times 2 is 26, okay? So 45 plus 54 is 99, plus 26 is 125, okay? So this is minus 125, and this would be equal to what? 165 minus 125 would be 40, okay? So pretty simple. So let's erase all of this and erase that and just say this is equal to 40. So let's go back up and say this is 40. It does take a while to kind of go through and get your determinants, but once you have that set up, you're basically at a point where you have your solutions. So your x is equal to your d sub x over d, your y is equal to your d sub y over d, and your z is equal to your d sub z over d, okay? So in each case, the denominator is the same. It's going to be 8. So let me just erase this, or I can actually just slide this down. So I'll just say this is equal to, equal to, equal to. I'm going to put an 8 in each denominator, okay? And the only thing that's going to change is the numerator. So d sub x is 48. D sub z is 40, okay? And d sub y is 32, okay? So if you go through and do the calculations, and let me slide this down just a little bit more so we can fit everything. 48 over 8 is obviously 6, 32 over 8 is 4, and 40 over 8 is 5. So x is 6, y is 4, and z is 5. Okay, so as an ordered triple, this is 6, 4, 5. Remember, this is your x, this is your y, this is your z. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at another example. Again, it's the same thing. It's just a tedious process, but we're going to get through it. So in this example, we already have all the equations written, again, in standard form, that ax plus by plus cz equals d. So let's go right into it. We want to start out with d. Again, this is the determinant of the coefficient matrix. So for the coefficients here, I've got negative 5. I've got negative 5 again. I've got a negative 1. I can go ahead and write that in. So negative 1. Okay. And then for this one, I've got a negative 5, a negative 4, and again, a negative 1. And then for this one, I've got a negative 1. I've got a negative 3, and then a 2. Okay. So let's recap. I got negative 5, and negative 1. Negative 5, negative 5, negative 1. Negative 5, negative 4, negative 1. Negative 5, negative 4, and negative 1. And then negative 1, negative 3, and 2. Negative 1, negative 3, and 2. So you always want to check stuff to make sure you got it right, because the simplest error for getting a negative or something like that, you're going to get the wrong answer. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is find my d sub x. So what's that equal to? Again, I just take the column with the kind of coefficients for x, in this case it's going to be this one, and I replace it with the constants of the system. So I'm going to take and put a negative 21, a negative 22, and a negative 11. And then the rest of this is the same. So it's negative 5, negative 4, and negative 3. And then it's negative 1, and positive 2. Okay, so let me cut this one away, and I'll drag this over. And now let me find my d sub y. Okay, so what is d sub y? Again, the same thing. I'm going to kind of look at my column that is the coefficients for the y variable. So that's this middle one here. And I'm going to replace that with the constants. So everything else is the same. So you have your negative 5, your negative 5, and your negative 1. This is going to be my constants. So negative 21, negative 22, and negative 11. And then for the last column, again, it stays the same. So negative 1, and positive 2. Okay, so let's cut this one away. And I'll just kind of slide this down. And let's get the last one. So we want d sub z as well. Okay, so that's going to be equal to what? So now I'm going to look at this kind of last column. These are the coefficients for z. I'm going to replace that with the constants. So everything else is the same. So you've got your negative 5, your negative 5 again, your negative 1. You got your negative 5, your negative 4, and your negative 3. Again, the last column, I'm just going to replace it. So negative 21, negative 22, and negative 11. Okay, so let's go ahead and get rid of this. Okay, so let's go back up and set everything up now. So I'm going to grab this and move it to another sheet. And I'm just going to erase all of my highlighting. And let me go to that other sheet and paste this in for us, and then we'll be ready to go. Okay, so I can erase all this highlighting. I don't need any of that. And let me go back up here, and we're just going to write some things down. So we know that we want to find d, we want to find d sub x, we want to find d sub y, and we want to find d sub z. Okay, so we're going to have these values, and we're going to use them to calculate our x, y, and z. So we already know that x is equal to d sub x over d, okay? Then y is equal to what? It's d sub y over d. Let me give myself some space. I'll come over here and say z is equal to d sub z over d. Okay, so we have all this set up. And let's go down. And let's start out with the value for d, because this is going to be used in everything. So let's just knock this one out first. So again, the quick way to do this is just to copy the first two columns. So you have your negative 5, and negative 1, negative 5, negative 4, and negative 3. Again, you're going to multiply down on that diagonal. So I'm going to go down this way. So negative 5 times negative 4 times 2. Negative 5 times negative 4 is 20. 20 times 2 is 40. Then plus, you're going to go down this diagonal. So you have negative 5 times negative 1, which is negative 5. And then you're going to go down this diagonal. You've got negative 1 times negative 5, which is 5, times negative 3, which is negative 15. Okay, so negative 5 plus negative 15 is negative 20, plus 40 is 20. So this first part of this is 20, then minus. Let me kind of erase these. And let me go up now. So if we go up, you have negative 1 times negative 4 times negative 1, which is going to be negative 4. So this is negative 4, then plus, if I go up again, negative 3 times negative 1 times negative 5 is going to be what? Well, it's basically just negative 3 times 5, which is negative 15. Okay, so negative 15, again, because you have 3 negatives there. And then going up here, 2 times negative 5 times negative 5. I know that's positive. And basically 5 times 5 is 25, then times 2 is 50. Okay, so what is this going to give me? Negative 4 plus negative 15 is negative 19. Plus 50 is 31. Okay, so basically what you have here is 20 minus 31, which is negative 11. Okay, so we can erase this stuff. We have our first one. We'll say this is negative 11. We'll go back up and just put that this is negative 11. So in each case, I can go ahead and write negative 11 down here. Okay, it's going to be in every formula. And now we can go back and start getting some solutions. Okay, so I find the determinant here. I can go and plug it into my formula for x, and then I'll find the determinant that's d sub y and then d sub z, plug those in for their respective formulas, and we'll be done. So to calculate the determinant the fast way, again, I'm going to copy the first two columns. So negative 21, negative 22, and negative 11, and then negative 5, negative 4, and negative 3. Again, I'm going to multiply going down first. So I'm going to go this way. Negative 21 times negative 4 times 2 is going to be 168. Then plus, I'm going to do negative 5 times negative 1 times negative 11. So I know that's negative, and 5 times 11 is 55. So this would be negative 55 here. Then plus, if I go down this way, you have negative times negative times negative, which is negative, okay? And you basically have 22 times 3, which is 66. So what's this sum here? 168 plus negative 55 is 113, plus negative 66 is 47. Okay, so the first part of this is 47. Then minus, let me erase those, okay? And then I want to go up now. So negative 11 times negative 4 times negative 1. Well, we know that's negative. So it's going to be negative 44, right? 11 times 4 is 44. So negative 44 goes there. And then going up here, negative 3 times negative 1 is 3. And then times negative 21 is negative 63. So let's put plus negative 63. And then lastly, we have 2 times negative 22 times negative 5. If you do 2 times negative 2, you get negative 44. And then times negative 5, that's going to be 220. So plus 220. So what is negative 44 plus negative 63? That's going to be negative 107. Okay. So if I did negative 107 plus 220, I get 113. Okay. So I'm going to put minus 113 here. So this is going to be negative. And basically, what is 113 minus 47? That's going to be 66. So this would be negative 66. Okay. So let's erase all of this, and we'll say this has a value of negative 66. And of course, we can just go back up and get our solution real quick. So for this one, it's negative 66. So we plug it into this formula. Negative 66 over negative 11 is positive 6. So we know that x is going to be 6, right? That's my x value, okay? So let's go down, and now we'll find y, okay? So let's go ahead and expand this by copying the first two columns. So negative 5, and negative 1, negative 21, negative 22, and negative 11. Okay, so let's go ahead and just multiply down. Negative 5 times negative 22 is 110. And if I multiply by 2, I get 220. Okay, so that's the first one. And then plus, if I multiply going down here, so we would have negative 21 times negative 1 times negative 1. That's just negative 21. Okay, and then plus, if I multiply down here, I know that's negative. I'll go ahead and put that in. And 5 times 11 is 55. So what is the sum of 220 plus negative 21? Well, that's 199. And then plus negative 55, that's 144. So the first part of this is going to be 144. Then minus, remember we're going to go up now. So let me erase these. When I go up, I'm going to start here and go up. So I know that's negative 22. If I go up here, that's going to be negative 55, right? Because again, it's 3 negatives. 11 times 5 is 55. So it's negative 55, okay? Then this one, 2 times negative 5 is negative 10. Then times a negative, okay, so I know that's going to be positive, 21. Well, 10 times 21 is 210, okay? So what is negative 22 minus 55? That's negative 77. Then if I add 210, I get 133, okay? So what is 144 minus 133? That's going to give me positive 11. So let's erase this. And let's put an 11 here. And let's go back up. And we'll say that this is 11. And if I put an 11 here, 11 over negative 11 is negative 1. So my y value here is negative 1. Okay? So now I just need to find z. And I just need to find the determinant of this guy first. So I'm going to copy negative 5, and negative 1, negative 5, negative 4, and negative 3. Okay, so we're going to multiply going down. Negative 5 times negative 4 times negative 11 is going to be negative 220. Okay, then plus negative 5 times negative 22 times negative 1. Well, we know that's negative. What's 5 times 22? Well, that's 110. So this would be negative 110. Okay, then plus, you've got negative 21 times negative 5 times negative 3, which is negative 315. Okay. All right, so now let's just go ahead and sum these. So negative 220 plus negative 110 is negative 330. Then if I add negative 315, I get negative 645. So the first part is negative 645. Again, then we subtract away this kind of second part where we're going to multiply up. So if I go up here, negative 1 times negative 4 is 4. Then times negative 21 is negative 84. Okay, so that's negative 84. Then plus negative 3 times negative 22 times negative 5. Well, negative 3 times negative 22 is 66. Then times negative 5 would be negative 330. Okay. So then lastly, I'm going to do this one. So you have a negative there because it's 3 negatives. So let's just put that in first. We know that 5 times 5 is 25. Then times 11 would be 275. So this would be negative 275 here. Okay. So what we want to do is sum these amounts. So negative 84 plus negative 330, that's negative 414, plus negative 275 is negative 689. So this would be minus a negative 689, which is negative 645 plus a positive 689, which is equal to what? It's just 689 minus 645, which is nothing more than 89 minus 45, which is 44. Okay, so this is going to be 44. So let's write that in. We'll just erase this. Okay, we'll say this value is 44. You can erase this. We don't need it anymore. And we can go back up now. We have our solution. So this is 44. So this is 44. So my solution here would be negative 4, right? So 44 over negative 11 is negative 4. So I'll just write a negative 4 in here for z, okay? And so my order triple here is 6, comma negative 1, comma negative 4. Again, x is 6, y is negative 1, z is negative 4.